I was halfway through replying to a client email when my phone lit up. Mom blinked across the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, Jordan." Her voice was unusually bright, almost festive. I straightened in my seat. "Hey, I just wanted to let you know Mark and I are heading to Europe tomorrow." "Isn't that exciting?" I blinked. "What? Oh, right. Almost forgot." "Well, not forgot, just didn't want to make a big deal of it. We sold the lake house in your car. We needed the money fast, and it's not like you were using either. Anyway, everything's finalized. The money's wired. We're off tomorrow afternoon. A laugh, breezy, carefree. Love you, sweetheart. We'll send pictures." The line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. Behind me, the barista refilled someone's order, called out a name. Outside, traffic moved like nothing had shifted, but something had. She said, "We." She meant her and Mark, not me. The lake house had been in our family since I was a kid. My father built the dock himself. My car, an old Mustang I'd rebuilt with Dad one summer, wasn't flashy, but it was mine. And yet, according to her, they were both gone. Casually liquidated, a line item on her itinerary. I closed my laptop slowly. No rush, no panic. I knew this day would come. I'd even planned for it, though I wasn't sure I'd ever have to use that plan. I took one last sip of lukewarm coffee, reached into my bag, and pulled out a second phone, the one I only used for one contact. I dialed one ring. Jordan Ethan's voice was calm-clipped. Familiar. "She did it," I said. "She sold the house and the car." A pause. "Understood. Do we proceed?" I exhaled through my nose. "Yes." Quietly. "All right, let's start with the deed records. I'll call you back in an hour." I ended the call and tucked the phone back into my bag. Around me, life in the cafe carried on. No one noticed that someone had just tried to erase me, but she forgot something. She forgot what my father taught me. How to prepare without noise, how to wait without warning, and how to protect what was mine before she ever knew its worth. The envelope had been in the back of my dresser drawer for 15 months. I'd moved it twice. Once when I relocated to Boise, once when I reorganized after the holidays, but I'd never opened it. I hadn't even been tempted. His handwriting was still crisp on the front. "Jordan, when you're ready." The morning he gave it to me, we were sitting on the porch of the lake house. I'd driven in from Spokane just to spend the weekend. He poured me coffee, then placed the envelope between us like it was nothing more than a receipt. "Don't open it," he said, "unless something happens. And only when you feel it's time." I thought he meant something dramatic, like if he got arrested or was diagnosed with something terminal. He didn't mention heart attacks. Didn't mention dying on a Tuesday morning in the garage while changing the brake pads on my car. That envelope became a ghost I lived beside. I kept paying the taxes on the house because I thought I was honoring his memory. I let Mom use the car because I thought it was the decent thing to do. But now she had sold both like they were pieces in a yard sale. I laid the envelope on the dining table. My hands were steady, but my chest throbbed with something I didn't have a name for. I slid my thumb under the seal. Inside were 5 documents. No letter, no instructions. The first was a notarized transfer deed. The lake house placed into an LLC 2 years before he died. The second, same thing, but for the car. The next 2 were for rental properties. I hadn't even known he owned duplexes in Spokane. And the last one, a signed certificate of organization for Horizon Holdings, LLC. My name, my address, my father's signature, his accountant's name, all of it. Legal, all of it airtight. I leaned back and stared at the table at the documents that confirmed what I now understood too well he had known. Somehow, even in the quiet, he had seen what was coming, and he hadn't trusted her. I folded everything back and placed it into a manila folder. Then I pulled out my phone and called Ethan again. He picked up before the first ring finished. "She never had the right to sell any of it," I said. Which means he replied, "We're not just defending, we're in control." Ethan met me at his office early the next morning. The The building was one of those converted mill structures with red brick and iron beams, now dressed up in matte gray paint and minimalist signage. He buzzed me in himself. "Coffee?" he asked. "No time," I said, handing him the manila folder. "Let's start with the buyer." He slid the documents out and skimmed. What the buyer listed here, Terra Horizon. Interesting coincidence. I smiled, but only slightly. Not a coincidence. He looked up. "This was part of your contingency. She and I talked right after Dad's funeral. Tara and I roomed together freshman year. She's in real estate now. I didn't tell her everything I just said. I was worried about manipulation and wanted to protect what little was left. If Mom ever tried to sell anything without legal authority, Tara agreed to act as the buyer quietly. She'd hold it until I could fix it." Ethan sat back impressed. "So your mother tried to sell stolen property, and your agent of record is someone you legally empowered. That means we don't just have standing to reverse the sale. We can take her to court." "Yes," he said. "But you already knew that." I nodded. "I don't want court." He raised an eyebrow. "I don't want to humiliate her," I said. "I want her to understand what she did. I want her to feel it not as a punishment, but as consequence. Legal battles don't teach people like her anything. They just shift blame." Ethan was quiet for a beat, then set the papers down. "So what's your plan?" "We freeze everything quietly, undo the transfer, get everything back under my name, lock the LLC, notify the county, and when she comes back from Europe, I let the silence fill the space. She finds herself outside her own life." Ethan gave a slow nod. "And Tara, she holds the deed a little longer. Once Linda tries to re-enter the house, Tara will be the one to deny her. I don't want her name on the rejection paperwork to be mine. Not yet." He tapped his pen thoughtfully. "You've really thought this through. 2 years buys a lot of clarity." He pushed the folder back toward me. "Then let's make it real." By noon, we had set the reversal in motion, and by nightfall, I had transferred every property under Horizon Holdings back into restricted status. It was time to let her build her own fall. They posted photos from the airport Linda in oversized sunglasses. Mark holding a passport like a boarding pass was a lottery ticket. The caption read, "Time for our next chapter. You're up here. We come." I didn't comment. Didn't like. Didn't react. She thought I was licking my wounds in Boise carless and stranded. That was the story she preferred. It helped her sleep. I let her have it. While they sipped champagne somewhere over the Atlantic, I moved fast. Ethan filed the reversal paperwork with the county. Tara returned the deed in a sealed envelope. I logged into the LLC's management dashboard and shut off access to every asset linked to my name, real estate vehicles, income from the rentals. The car was easier. The title had never fully transferred. A few clicks and it was officially off the market. Mark had left it in long-term parking at the Boise airport. I arranged for it to be picked up detailed and delivered back to my garage. The house required more subtlety. Ethan drafted the eviction notice under the LLC's name, not mine. Legally, it didn't even have to reference me. Tara would be listed as the authorized agent when the notice arrived 30 days after Linda's scheduled return, just enough time for her to unpack, catch her breath, and then read the letter taped to the front door. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I thought I would be, but what I felt was cleaner than rage. It was detachment, the kind that comes when you finally stop asking someone to be who they can't. Dad used to say, "Some people don't leave, they wait to be forced out." Linda had always been one of those. I used to imagine she'd come to her senses one day, that she'd realize family wasn't something you spend. But that was before I saw her name on those forged documents. Before I heard her voice in my ear that day, so light, so celebratory, telling me that everything I'd loved was already gone. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But this wasn't revenge. It was an education. And I wasn't serving it to her. I was letting her find it on her own plate. The day they landed in Lisbon, I made one final phone call to confirm delivery schedules. Then I took the car for a long drive past the lake house she thought she owned, and into the evening like nothing had ever been taken from me at all. She showed up 4 weeks earlier than expected. No call, no warning, just a knock on my apartment door on a Thursday afternoon. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. The hair that had been perfectly curled in all her vacation selfies was pulled back with a rubber band. Her designer bag looked warped, like it had been overstuffed and dragged through customs. There were deep shadows beneath her eyes. For a moment, neither of us said anything. "Jordan," she finally said, voice low. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into my apartment like it still belonged to her, scanned the space like she expected to find some trace of her own design, even though she'd never stepped foot in this place before. She hovered near the kitchen island as if waiting for an invitation to speak. I gave her tea instead. We sat in silence while the kettle boiled. When I placed the mug in front of her, she wrapped both hands around it and stared into the steam. "Mark left," she said in Portugal. "He met someone on a boat tour, 23 backpacker from Marseille, told me he needed to find himself. Took what was left of our cash and vanished." I nodded once, not in sympathy and acknowledgement. I tried to get a flight back on points she added, but the account was empty. I had to borrow money from a stranger at the airport to call the airline. And when I landed, I didn't know where else to go. There it was, the real sentence buried in all the others. I didn't say anything for a while. Let the space stretch. "Of course you can stay," I said finally. "Just for a little while." She blinked, surprised. "Thank you, baby." I know I don't deserve it. I didn't argue. She stayed in the guest room. I gave her clean towels, a key, and the Wi-Fi password. I didn't ask what she planned to do next. She didn't ask what I'd been doing since she left. Each evening, she cooked dinner, small, over-seasoned attempts to recreate meals from when I was a child. Each morning, she washed the dishes before I woke. I let her think this meant something. I smiled when she asked about my work. I nodded when she said she might look for a job. But I also kept notes quietly. Every receipt she used my card, for every call she made from my phone line, every statement she made that contradicted something she'd said before. I wasn't collecting evidence to use against her. I was collecting it for myself, for the record. Because forgiveness without clarity isn't forgiveness, it's a razor. And I had spent enough of my life being erased. When she went to bed early one night, I pulled out the old notebook I used for client strategy briefs and turned to a fresh page. I wrote her name at the top. Then I listed the date she returned. She got the job herself. I didn't ask where she was going when she left that morning with a wrinkled resume and a borrowed sweater. When she returned hours later, she placed a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter and said, "It's nights, office cleaning, 2 buildings, minimum wage. They said I start tomorrow if I want it." I said, "Then you should." And that was that. The first week, she limped home with sore feet and stiff shoulders. I left Epsom salts by the bathroom door and didn't comment when she didn't thank me. She woke before I did, dragging herself out of bed to avoid the embarrassment of being seen asleep past sunrise. Something about it all felt too rehearsed, too neat. The right kind of suffering performed at the right volume. A little humility, just loud enough to be noticed. But then there were the moments when she forgot to play. One afternoon, I found her in the laundry room scrubbing the cuffs of her work pants by hand. Even though the machine was free, she wasn't humming. She wasn't posing, just focused her mouth a flat line. Another evening, she sat at the kitchen table with a notepad mapping out her hours and expenses like she was building a life from dust. No audience, no narration. I watched. I didn't praise her. I didn't rescue her. That wasn't the point. She cooked simple meals, now lentils, rice, canned vegetables, and she ate every bite, no longer pushing away her plate with the practiced disinterest of someone who'd always had too much. Occasionally, she spoke about applying for a second job, about taking GED prep classes, maybe about how she once wanted to study interior design before things got complicated. I didn't ask what complicated meant. She didn't offer more. We weren't mother and daughter in those moments. We were 2 women sitting across from each other in a room where neither of us had the upper hand. And yet something shifted when she stopped asking for it. She never once mentioned the lake house, never asked about the car. Maybe she assumed they were lost. Maybe she knew they weren't and chose not to ask. Maybe she was waiting for me to bring it up. But silence has its own gravity. It either pulls you closer or teaches you how to hold your shape without apology. One night as I passed her door, I heard her crying softly. Not loudly enough to be heard. Not loud enough to be comforted. Just the sound of someone whose old world had collapsed and who was still deciding if this new one could be built with her bare hands. The second envelope was smaller. I'd almost forgotten it existed. I found it tucked behind an old photo album in the bottom drawer of my desk. No label this time, just my name written in my father's distinct, careful hand. Inside was a USB drive and a folded sheet of paper. His writing again. If she ever returns, and if she ever tells the truth, give her the rest. But only if you're ready to see all of it yourself. I plugged it in. There were no videos, no letters. Just numbers, ledgers, spreadsheets, legal scans, a quiet forest of truth. The trust fund was real. Established 4 years before he died, tied to an account in Wyoming hidden under a shell company. I was the sole beneficiary. The house, the car, and the rental properties were only a piece of it. What shocked me more was the note buried in one of the folders, a record of a prior attempt to access the fund 2 years ago. Linda's name, her forged signature. A denied claim flagged by the bank and quietly closed after my father passed. She had tried even then, and she had failed. I printed out what mattered: the trust paperwork. The forged document, a summary page listing every asset I now legally controlled. Then I began to write not a speech, not a confrontation, just a letter not addressed to her, addressed to the truth. For once, I didn't want her to hear my voice. I wanted her to see the paper, to read what had always been hidden in plain sight. When I finished, I folded it neatly, sealed it, and placed it beside her teacup. The truth was hers now. What she did with it wasn't mine to control. The drive to the lake house was silent. She didn't ask where we were going until we pulled into the gravel lot. Her breath caught the moment she saw it, the same pale siding, the same porch swing, the same wind off the water that always smelled like salt and pine. I didn't say anything. I just unlocked the door. She stepped inside slowly, her hand grazing the trim as if to confirm it was real. In the kitchen, she paused by the ceramic teapot she once bought at a yard sale. On the bookshelf, her eyes caught the framed photo of Dad in his flannel, holding a fish bigger than his smile. I let her wander. When she sat on the couch, I placed the envelope in her lap and left the room. From the hallway, I listened to the rustle of paper. Then silence, then breath that broke, and then soft, guttural sobbing. It came in waves. She didn't call my name. When I returned, she was still holding the letter hands, trembling. I sat across from her and waited. She didn't deny anything. She didn't defend herself. She just looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as a daughter, but as the ledger she could no longer rewrite. "You have a choice," I said. "You can leave now with dignity. Or you can stay not as my mother, but as caretaker. This house is going to become a retreat for women who were erased by people who claim to love them." She nodded once. "I want to stay." I stood and opened the window beside her. The lake air rushed in, and for the first time in years, it didn't sting. It steadied. It cleared. Jordan learns the power of quiet preparation and self-reliance in the face of betrayal. Her father's foresight embodied in the hidden envelope, and LLC teaches her to protect what matters without seeking confrontation. By reclaiming the lake house and car, she realizes that true control comes from clarity and strategic patience, not emotional outbursts. Her mother's actions reveal that family ties don't guarantee loyalty, but Jordan's measured response, offering shelter while maintaining boundaries, shows her growth. She learns to let consequences teach lessons, preserving her dignity and turning loss into a foundation for empowering others.
The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports for my hospitality empire. Maria Santos, one of the city's most prestigious wedding planners, sounded uncomfortable on the other end of the line. "Miss Daniels, I'm calling about your reception booking for next month," she began hesitantly. "I just got off the phone with your parents and they've asked me to cancel everything for your wedding. They said there's no budget left after covering your sister Victoria's ceremony." I leaned back in my leather chair, gazing out at the Seattle skyline from my corner office on the 47th floor. "That's interesting," I replied calmly, setting down my Mont Blanc pen. "What do you mean?" Maria asked, clearly confused by my relaxed tone. A smile spread across my face as I glanced at the property ownership documents spread across my mahogany desk. "Maria, what venue did my family book for Victoria's wedding?" "The Grand Cascade Estate, of course. It's the most exclusive venue in the Pacific Northwest. Your parents specifically requested it because they wanted something that would, and I quote, show everyone what real wealth looks like." I couldn't help but chuckle. "And when is Victoria's wedding scheduled?" "This Saturday. Miss Daniels, I'm really sorry about this situation. Your parents seemed quite firm about prioritizing your sister's event. They mentioned something about you being between jobs and unable to contribute to the costs anyway." "Between jobs. If only they knew." "Maria, I need to ask you something and I want you to check your records carefully. Who actually owns the Grand Cascade Estate?" There was a pause, followed by the sound of papers rustling. "Let me see here. The property is owned by... Oh my goodness. It's owned by Cascade Holdings LLC. But wait, that can't be right. What does it say?" "It says the primary owner is Alexandra Daniels. But that's you. How is that possible?" I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city I'd quietly conquered over the past 5 years. "Maria, I think we need to have a different conversation. Can you meet me at the Grand Cascade Estate in an hour?" "Of course, but Miss Daniels, I'm confused. Your parents have been very clear that you're not in a position to afford." "1 hour, Maria. And bring all the contracts for both events." After hanging up, I allowed myself a moment to reflect on how spectacularly my family had misjudged my situation. While they thought I was struggling as a freelance event coordinator, I had actually built the largest luxury hospitality empire on the West Coast. 23 premium venues, 15 boutique hotels, and a catering company that served everyone from tech billionaires to Hollywood celebrities. The Grand Cascade Estate was my crown jewel, a 50-acre property featuring a restored 1920s mansion, formal gardens, and panoramic views of the Cascade Mountains. I'd purchased it 3 years ago for $15 million and spent another $8 million renovating it into the most sought-after wedding venue in the region. The waiting list was typically 18 months long. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Victoria. "Hope you're not too upset about the wedding thing. Mom and Dad said you'd understand since you can't really afford a fancy wedding anyway. Maybe you can have something small at a community center later." 2 hearts. I screenshot the message and saved it to a folder I'd been building for months. Documentation of my family's assumptions about my financial situation. It would make our upcoming conversation much more interesting. 45 minutes later, I pulled into the circular driveway of the Grand Cascade Estate in my BMW i8. I'd deliberately chosen my most modest car for family interactions, usually driving my old Honda Civic when visiting my parents. Today felt like the right time to make a different impression. Maria's Mercedes was already parked near the main entrance. I found her waiting in the grand foyer, looking anxious and clutching a thick folder of contracts. "Miss Daniels," she began the moment she saw me, "I've been going through everything and I'm so confused. The ownership documents clearly show you own this property, but your parents have been treating this like they're paying for everything themselves." I gestured for her to follow me into my private office, a room most clients never saw. The walls were lined with awards from the hospitality industry, photos with celebrity clients, and newspaper clippings about my various business acquisitions. "Maria, what exactly did my parents tell you about the financial arrangements?" She opened her folder nervously. "They said they were covering all costs for both weddings. Victoria's reception for 300 guests, your reception for 150 guests. The total package was $180,000 for both events. But this morning your father called and said they could only afford Victoria's wedding. He specifically said you were between jobs and living paycheck to paycheck, so you'd have to understand about canceling your reception." I pulled out my laptop and opened the venue's booking system. "Maria, take a look at this screen. What do you see for the booking under Victoria Daniels? Her eyes widened as she read. It says the booking was made by Richard Daniels, but payment is listed as owner courtesy rate $0. Both weddings are listed the same way. That's correct. My parents have never paid a single dollar for either wedding. When Victoria got engaged, my mother called me crying about how they couldn't afford the kind of wedding Victoria dreamed of. I told them I'd handle it and I arranged everything through you, but I never told them I owned the venue. Maria stared at me in disbelief. So you've been covering all the costs this entire time? Every penny. The catering, flowers, photography, music, decorations. All of it. The total cost for both weddings is actually closer to $240,000, not $180,000. I've been subsidizing their dream weddings while they think they're doing me a favor by including me in Victoria's Day. I turned my laptop screen toward her, showing the detailed breakdown of services. Here's what I want you to do. Call my parents and tell them there's been a mix-up with the billing. Tell them the actual cost for Victoria's wedding alone is $180,000, and it needs to be paid in full by Thursday or the event will be cancelled. But Miss Daniels, they think they've already paid. No, Maria. They think they're generous parents who are helping both their daughters. Let's see how generous they really are when they're asked to pay actual money. She nodded slowly, beginning to understand. And what about your wedding reception? Oh, my reception is still happening. Same date, same time, same location. But now it's going to be very different. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. I'm going to invite some people who actually appreciate what I've built. Over the next hour, Maria and I restructured everything. My wedding reception would proceed as planned, but instead of the modest celebration my parents had envisioned, it would showcase exactly who Alexandra Daniels really was. Thursday morning arrived and my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. My father's name appeared on the screen. Alexandra, we need to talk immediately, he said without preamble. The wedding planner is saying we owe $180,000 for Victoria's wedding. That's impossible. We already paid for both weddings. What do you mean you already paid, Dad? We arranged everything with you. You told us you'd handle the details. I told you I'd handle the arrangements, which I did. I never said I'd pay for anything. Didn't you wonder why a venue that usually costs $30,000 to book was somehow affordable for 2 weddings? There was a long silence. Alexandra, what are you saying? I'm saying you might want to check who actually owns the Grand Cascade estate, Dad. Another pause, longer this time. What do you mean? Look it up. Cascade Holdings LLC. See who the primary owner is. I could hear him typing on his computer, probably Googling the property information. Then I heard my mother's voice in the background, shrill with panic. Richard, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Alexandra, my father's voice was strained. It says here that you own the venue. That's correct. But that's impossible. You're between jobs. You can't afford rent on a decent apartment. How could you possibly own a $20 million estate? Dad, when was the last time you actually asked me about my work? Real questions, not just assumptions about my failures. Well, you said you were freelancing in event planning. I did say that. I own the largest event planning and hospitality company in the Pacific Northwest. Cascade Holdings LLC owns 23 venues, 15 hotels, and generates approximately $85 million in annual revenue. I employ over 400 people. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. That's impossible, my mother's voice came through the speaker. If you had that kind of money, why are you driving that old Honda? Why do you live in that tiny apartment downtown? Because I value privacy and prefer people to know me for who I am, not what I own. Unfortunately, my own family has spent years making assumptions instead of asking questions. Alexandra, my father's voice was shaky now. About Victoria's wedding? The wedding can proceed as planned. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. to pay the $180,000, or I'll have to cancel the booking to make room for paying clients. We don't have $180,000 lying around. Then I guess you'll need to figure something out. Maybe take out a loan or sell some assets. You know, the same things you've been telling me to do for years when I faced financial challenges. But you're our daughter. Surely you can help us. I am helping you. I'm giving you the same rates I give any client. Actually, I'm giving you a discount. Our premium Saturday rate is usually $220,000 for a wedding this elaborate. My mother grabbed the phone. Alexandra, this is ridiculous. We're family. Family helps family. You're absolutely right, Mom. Family helps family. Which is why I've been paying for both weddings while listening to you tell everyone how I'm too poor to contribute to family events. Which is why I've been quietly covering Victoria's engagement party, her bridal shower, and her bachelorette weekend in Napa Valley. You paid for all of that? Every penny. Through my companies, using my connections with my money. While you told people I was too broke to contribute. We didn't know. Because you didn't ask. You assumed. For 3 years, you've assumed I was failing while I was actually building an empire. Alexandra, please. We made a mistake. We're sorry. But Victoria's wedding is in 2 days. We can't possibly come up with that much money. I looked out at the grounds of my estate, where my staff was already beginning setup for the weekend's events. I'll make you a deal. You can have Victoria's wedding at no charge, just like I originally planned. Oh, thank God. But, I continued, there are conditions. What conditions? First, you're going to call everyone you invited and tell them the truth about who paid for this wedding. Second, you're going to publicly acknowledge that I own this venue and have been subsidizing your family events for years. Third, you're going to apologize to me in front of every single wedding guest for years of dismissing my success. Alexandra, that's humiliating. More humiliating than spending 3 years telling people your daughter is a failure? More humiliating than canceling my wedding reception because you assumed I couldn't afford it. We never meant. What you meant doesn't matter anymore, Mom. What matters is what you did. And what you're going to do now. And if we refuse? Then you pay the $180,000 or Victoria gets married at the community center you suggested for my reception. The line went quiet except for whispered arguing between my parents. We need time to think, my father finally said. You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. Maria has all the payment details if you choose that option. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies and 72 degrees. I stood in the bridal suite of my own venue, putting the finishing touches on my wedding dress. Today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, and I was determined not to let my family's drama overshadow it. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. I can't believe what's happening. Mom and Dad told me everything. I'm so sorry, Alex. I had no idea you were paying for everything. Can we talk before the ceremony? I texted back, come to the bridal suite. 10 minutes later, Victoria knocked on my door. When I opened it, her eyes were red from crying. Alex, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you owned this place. I had no idea you'd been paying for everything. Mom and Dad always made it sound like they were handling all the finances. Victoria, this isn't your fault. You asked for a beautiful wedding and that's what you're getting. But I feel terrible. All those things I said about you not being able to afford things. I was just repeating what Mom and Dad said. I sat down beside her on the vintage sofa. Victoria, what do you actually know about my work? She looked embarrassed. Honestly, almost nothing. I knew you did something with events, but Mom always made it sound like you were barely getting by. She'd say things like, poor Alexandra, still trying to make it work with that little business of hers. And you never asked me directly? I should have. I'm sorry. I got caught up in wedding planning and just assumed Mom and Dad knew what they were talking about. I pulled out my iPad and showed her photos from some of my recent events. A tech billionaire's wedding in Malibu that made headlines in Architectural Digest, a Fortune 500 company's annual gala, a celebrity's birthday party that required signing NDAs. Victoria's mouth fell open. You planned all of these? I own the companies that planned all of these. Cascade Holdings, Premier Events Pacific, Daniels Hospitality Group. This estate is just one of 23 venues I own. Alex, you're rich. Like really rich. I'm successful. There's a difference. Being rich is having money. Being successful is building something meaningful. And I've been such a brat about everything. All those comments about you not contributing to family events. Victoria, I want you to have the wedding of your dreams. That hasn't changed. But things are going to be different with our parents moving forward. What did you tell them? I gave them a choice. They could acknowledge the truth about who's been paying for everything, or they could actually pay for your wedding themselves. What did they choose? Before I could answer, there was another knock on the door. My mother's voice called out, Alexandra? May we come in? We? I asked. Your father and I. I looked at Victoria, who nodded. Come in. My parents entered the bridal suite looking more subdued than I'd ever seen them. My father was carrying a folder and my mother had clearly been crying. Alexandra, my father began, we owe you an enormous apology. And we owe you money, my mother added quickly. We brought a cashier's check for $180,000. I was genuinely surprised. You're paying for the wedding? We took out a second mortgage on the house, my father explained. It seemed like the right thing to do considering everything. But we also want to make the other choice, my mother said. We want to tell people the truth. About what you've accomplished, about what you've done for our family, about how wrong we've been. Victoria stood up and hugged our parents. I think that's the right choice. I looked at the cashier's check my father was holding. Keep your money. Victoria's wedding is my gift to her and to you. But I am going to hold you to the other part of the deal. Of course, my mother said. We'll tell everyone. And there's something else, I added. After today, if you want to be part of my life, my real life, not the version you've imagined, you need to start asking real questions and stop making assumptions. We understand, my father said. Alexandra, we're proud of you. We should have said that years ago. 3 hours later, I stood at the altar in my own garden, surrounded by friends who actually knew who I was. My parents had indeed followed through on their promise. During Victoria's ceremony that morning, they had publicly acknowledged my ownership of the venue and my support of their family events. The reaction from the extended family and family friends had been exactly what I'd expected. Shock, followed by a lot of uncomfortable questions about why they'd been spreading a completely different story for years. But now, at my own ceremony, those dynamics didn't matter. I was marrying someone who'd fallen in love with the person I was before he knew anything about my business success. Our guests included employees who'd become friends, clients who'd become mentors, and industry colleagues who'd become chosen family. As the sun set over the Cascade Mountains, I stood with my new husband on the terrace of my estate, watching our guests dance under string lights I'd designed myself. Maria appeared beside us with a glass of champagne. Mrs. Patterson, she said, using my new married name, I have to ask. How long have you been planning this revelation? I smiled, thinking about the folder of screenshots, documented conversations, and evidence I'd been collecting for months. I wasn't planning it exactly, but I was preparing for it. I knew eventually they'd push things far enough that the truth would have to come out. And now we see if they really meant what they said about wanting to know the real me. My husband wrapped his arm around my waist. For what it's worth, I think your parents learned something important today. What's that? That their daughter doesn't just plan events, she orchestrates perfect endings. As if on cue, fireworks began lighting up the sky above the estate, spelling out Alexandra and David, in brilliant gold and silver. I'd arranged them as a surprise for my new husband, but watching my parents' faces as they looked up in wonder, I realized they were also the perfect punctuation mark for this chapter of our family story. The girl they thought was too poor to afford a proper wedding had just given them a night they'd never forget. At the venue she owned, with the staff she employed, surrounded by the success she'd built while they weren't paying attention. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just finally letting people see who you really are. The words still echoed in my head as I sat in my car outside my childhood home, watching the warm glow from the dining room windows. Christmas Eve 2023. The night that changed everything. I'd driven 3 hours through a snowstorm to be there, carrying carefully wrapped presents and Mom's favorite apple pie from the bakery downtown. 28 years old, and I still felt like that hopeful little girl who just wanted her family to love her. Inside, the scene was picture perfect. Mom had outdone herself with the decorations. Twinkling lights, silver and gold ornaments. The massive Douglas fir Dad always insisted on cutting down himself. My older brother Marcus sat at the head of the table with his wife Jennifer and their twin boys. My sister Victoria was there with her fiancé David, showing off her new engagement ring. And then there was me, always the odd one out. Sarah's here, I announced, setting the pie on the counter. Oh, Mom said without looking up from carving the turkey. I didn't set you a place. I wasn't sure you'd actually show. Marcus snorted. She always shows up where she's not wanted. I forced a smile and grabbed a chair from the kitchen. No problem, I'll squeeze in. Dinner started well enough. The boys were excited about Santa coming, Jennifer complimented Mom's cooking, And David shared funny stories from his law firm. I listened quietly, jumping in when I could but mostly feeling invisible. Then Marcus brought up his promotion. Senior Vice President of Operations, he announced proudly. With a corner office and everything. We're so proud of you, honey, Mom beamed, raising her wine glass. You've always been our achiever. Victoria cleared her throat. Actually, I have news too. David and I set the wedding date, June 15th at the Riverside Country Club. We're thinking a summer garden theme. The table erupted in excitement. Mom immediately started planning. Dad discussed the guest list and everyone began talking about flowers and venues and honeymoon destinations. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely happy for my sister. I'd love to help however I can. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Well, we're keeping it pretty intimate. Family and close friends only. Of course, I nodded. I'm family. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. David coughed. The thing is, Sarah, we're trying to keep costs reasonable, and with my firm's partners coming, plus Victoria's sorority sisters. What David's trying to say, Victoria interrupted, is that we need to be selective about the guest list. The implication hit me like a physical blow. My own sister's wedding and I wasn't invited. I see, I said quietly. Mom set down her wine glass. Sweetheart, you have to understand. This is Victoria's special day. She wants everything to be perfect. And what exactly would be imperfect about me being there? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Come on, Sarah. You know how you are. How am I? Dramatic. Emotional. Remember Victoria's graduation party when you had that meltdown about not getting into law school? I was upset. You made everything about you, Jennifer added, bouncing one of the twins on her knee. Victoria deserves her moment to shine. I looked around the table at these people I'd called family my entire life. So I'm not invited to my sister's wedding because you think I'll, what? Ruin it somehow. It's not personal, Victoria said, though she couldn't meet my eyes. How is this not personal? Dad finally spoke up. Sarah, you're being unreasonable. This is their decision to make. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Fine. I understand you want a small wedding. But maybe we could do something else. A bachelorette party or help with planning or... Honestly, Mom interrupted, setting down her fork with force. This is exactly what we're talking about. You can't just accept things as they are. You always have to push and make demands. I'm not making demands. I'm trying to find a way to be part of my sister's life. By inserting yourself where you're not wanted? Marcus shot back. The words hung in the air like smoke. Not wanted. There was finally said out loud. I didn't realize my presence was such a burden, I said quietly. Mom's face was flushing red, the way it always did when she drank too much wine. You know what, Sarah? I'm tired of walking on eggshells around you. We're all tired of it. Walking on eggshells? Yes. Every family gathering we have to worry about your feelings. Make sure you're included. Make sure you don't feel left out. We can't just enjoy ourselves because you're always there needing attention. My chest felt tight. I don't need attention. I just want to be part of this family. Well, maybe, Mom said, her voice rising, just maybe that's the problem. Maybe we'd all be happier if we didn't have to pretend anymore. The room went completely silent. Even the twins stopped babbling. What are you saying? I whispered. Mom stood up abruptly, swaying slightly. You want to know the truth? Fine. Here's the truth. Every holiday, every birthday, every family event, we dread having you there. You're needy, you're clingy, and you suck the joy out of everything. Mom, Victoria started. But Mom was on a roll now, 28 years of resentment pouring out. Do you know what it's like having a child who disappoints you at every turn? Who never quite measures up? Who always needs something? I felt like I was drowning. I don't understand. What did I do wrong? What didn't you do wrong? Mom laughed bitterly. Average grades, no real career, no husband, no kids. You're 28 years old and what do you have to show for it? Nothing. Each word was a knife. I have my accounting practice. I just started. Oh please, your little bookkeeping business? That's not a real career, Sarah. That's something people do on the side. Dad reached for Mom's arm. Linda, maybe you should. No, Robert. She needs to hear this. We've been too nice for too long. Mom turned back to me, her eyes cold and hard. You know what I think about every Christmas when I see you walk through that door? I think about how different our lives would be. How much happier we'd all be. The room was spinning. Mom, please. You want to know what the best Christmas gift would be? She raised her wine glass like she was making a toast. You leaving my life. Permanently. I wish. Her voice caught for just a moment then hardened again. I wish you were never born. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to stop ticking. I stared at my mother. This woman who'd given birth to me, raised me, tucked me in at night when I was small, and saw nothing but disgust in her eyes. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mom, maybe you should. It needed to be said, Mom replied, sitting back down. I'm tired of pretending. I looked around the table one more time. Victoria was staring at her plate. Jennifer was suddenly very interested in wiping the twins' faces. David was checking his phone. Dad was refilling his wine glass. Nobody defended me. Nobody said she'd gone too far. Nobody even looked at me. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like water. Okay. Okay, what? Mom asked. Hey. I'll give you what you want. I walked to the coat closet, grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Sarah, wait, Victoria called out, but I was already outside. The cold air hit my face like a slap. I got in my car and drove away from that house, away from those people, away from everything I'd thought was my life. But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the all-night diner on Route 9 and sat in a corner booth until sunrise, thinking about what Mom had said. About how they'd all be happier without me. Maybe she was right. Maybe they would be. So I decided to find out. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment with a clarity I'd never felt before. If my family wanted me gone, I'd give them exactly what they asked for. But I wasn't going to do it halfway. I was going to disappear completely. First, I called my accountant. Not my little bookkeeping business, but my actual accountant who managed my real finances. See, what my family didn't know was that their failure daughter had been very, very busy over the past 5 years. Michael, it's Sarah. I need to liquidate everything. The Portland properties, the Denver apartment complex, the tech stocks. All of it. All of it? Sarah, your portfolio is worth nearly $12 million. Are you sure? I'm sure. I want it converted to cash and moved to the accounts we discussed. How long will it take? Maybe 2 weeks for everything to process. Can I ask what this is about? I'm starting over. Clean slate. Next, I called my property manager. Jenny, I need you to list my apartment. I want it sold quickly, even if we have to take less than market value. Then I called the post office and arranged for all my mail to be forwarded to a P.O. box in a different state. I contacted my clients and transferred their accounts to another accounting firm. I closed my local bank accounts and credit cards. Within 10 days, I had erased every trace of Sarah Morrison from Portland, Oregon. But the hardest part was yet to come. I sat at my kitchen table with a piece of paper and wrote a single sentence. You got your wish. I'm giving you the gift you wanted. I mailed copies to Mom, Dad, Marcus, and Victoria. Then I turned off my phone, packed 2 suitcases, and drove to the airport. By February 1st, I was Sarah Bennett, my grandmother's maiden name, living in a small coastal town in North Carolina. I rented a cottage near the beach and spent my days walking on the sand, reading books, and slowly figuring out who I was when I wasn't trying to earn love from people who didn't want to give it. It was peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up each morning without that knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering if today would be the day I finally disappointed someone I cared about. I started freelance consulting work helping small businesses with their books. Nothing fancy, nothing that would show up in any searches. Just quiet, steady work that paid the bills and left me time to heal. Months passed. I didn't check social media. I didn't Google my family's names. I didn't even think about them most days. Until my phone rang on a Tuesday morning in March. The number was local, so I answered. Hello. Is this Sarah Bennett? Who's asking? This is Margaret Walsh from Cape Fear Regional Medical Center. I'm trying to locate the next of kin for Linda Morrison. She was brought in last night after a car accident. My blood turned to ice. I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number. Are you related to Linda Morrison from Portland, Oregon? Her insurance card lists you as her emergency contact. Of course it did. I'd been everyone's emergency contact for years, handling their medical appointments, insurance claims, and paperwork. The responsible one. The one who took care of everyone else. What happened? Mrs. Morrison was in a serious accident. She's stable, but she's asking for you. Her husband and other children are here, but she keeps saying she needs Sarah. Are you Sarah? I closed my eyes. 3 months of peace, and with one phone call it all came crashing back. I'm sorry, I said. I can't help you. But she's your mother. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. This time it was a number I recognized. Dad's cell phone. I let it go to voicemail. Then Marcus called. Then Victoria. I turned off my phone and went for a walk on the beach. When I came back an hour later, I had 17 missed calls and a dozen voicemail messages. Against my better judgment, I listened to the first one. Sarah, it's Dad. I know things were said at Christmas that shouldn't have been said. But Mom's in the hospital and she's asking for you. He needs you. We all need you. Please call me back. The second message was from Marcus, his voice shaking. Sarah, where the hell are you? Mom's hurt and she keeps asking for you. I called your apartment and some stranger answered saying you moved. Your phone's been disconnected. What's going on? Call me. Victoria's message was barely coherent through her tears. Sarah, please, I'm begging you. I know I hurt you. I know we all hurt you. But Mom might not make it and she's asking for you over and over. She says she needs to tell you something. Please call me back. I sat on my couch staring at my phone, feeling that familiar pull. The desperate need to fix things, to be there for people who had made it clear they didn't want me there. But then I remembered Mom's face on Christmas Eve. The disgust in her eyes. The way she'd said she wished I was never born. They wanted me gone. I'd given them what they wanted. So why were they calling? I turned my phone back off and made myself dinner. 3 days later the calls stopped coming. I figured that meant either Mom had recovered or she hadn't and they'd given up trying to find me. I went back to my quiet life, helping Mrs. Patterson with her bakery's books and organizing the monthly financial reports for the local marina. Simple work. Peaceful work. But late at night I'd lie awake wondering what had happened. Wondering if Mom was okay. Wondering what she'd wanted to tell me. 2 weeks after the hospital called, I broke down and created a fake social media account just to check on my family. What I found made my stomach drop. Victoria had posted a photo from the hospital. Mom was in a bed, hooked up to machines, looking smaller and frilier than I'd ever seen her. The caption read, "Please pray for our mom. She's fighting so hard, but she keeps asking for someone who isn't here." The comments were full of people asking where I was, why I wasn't with my family during this difficult time. Victoria's friends, old neighbors, family friends, all wondering what kind of daughter abandons her mother in the hospital. I scrolled through more posts. Marcus had shared a photo of him, Victoria, and Dad in the hospital waiting room, looking exhausted and scared. Day 12 in the ICU. Still hoping for a miracle. Day 12. She'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks and I'd ignored their calls. I closed the laptop and sat in my living room staring out at the ocean. For the first time since I'd left Portland, I felt that familiar weight settling on my chest. Guilt. Responsibility. The crushing need to fix everything. But I'd tried to fix everything my whole life, and where had it gotten me? Sitting at a Christmas dinner where my own mother told me she wished I'd never been born. Well, I'd made my choice. I'd given them what they wanted. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Sarah, this is Jennifer, Marcus's wife. I got your new number from your old landlord. I'm sorry to text you like this, but your mom is dying. She's been unconscious for 3 days, but before that all she talked about was finding you. She said she had something important to tell you. I know things were complicated with your family, but she's your mother. Please consider coming home. I stared at the message for a long time. Jennifer had always been kind to me even when the rest of the family wasn't. She was the one who'd included me in conversations, who'd asked about my work, who'd actually listened when I spoke. But even Jennifer didn't know the whole truth about what had happened at Christmas dinner. She thought things were just complicated. I typed back, I'm sorry to hear about Mom's condition, but she made it very clear that she didn't want me in her life. I'm respecting her wishes. Jennifer's response came quickly. Sarah, whatever happened, she regrets it. She's been crying for you every day since Christmas. Please don't let pride keep you from saying goodbye. Pride. He thought this was about pride. I turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning my phone was buzzing with another unknown number. This time I didn't recognize the voice on the voicemail. Ms. Bennett, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from Cape Fear Regional. I'm calling regarding Linda Morrison. I understand you're estranged from your family, but I need you to know that your mother has been asking for you constantly. She's not going to make it much longer, and she seems to have something urgent she needs to tell you. I've seen a lot of families in my 20 years of practice, and I've never seen someone fight this hard to stay alive just to talk to someone. I don't know what happened between you, but she loves you. Please consider coming to see her. I sat at my kitchen table holding the phone, feeling like I was being torn in half. Half of me wanted to race to the airport, fly to Portland, and be at Mom's bedside. The daughter who'd spent 28 years trying to earn her love. But the other half, the half that had finally learned to protect herself, remembered the look in Mom's eyes when she'd said those words. The relief on everyone's faces when I'd finally left. If I went back now, if I saved the day and held her hand and forgave everything, what would that teach them? That they could treat me however they wanted because I'd always come running back? No. I'd spent my whole life being the one who gave in, who apologized, who made things right. For once they could face the consequences of their choices. I deleted the voicemail and went to work on Mrs. Patterson's books. But I couldn't concentrate. Every time I tried to focus on numbers, I heard Dr. Williams saying, "She loves you." Did she though? Or did she just need something from me like always? That afternoon, Victoria called from her own phone. "Sarah, I know you're getting these messages. I know you're out there somewhere. Please just listen." Her voice was hoarse from crying. "Mom's dying and it's my fault. What I said about the wedding, about not inviting you, it broke her heart. She said she'd been holding in her anger for so long that when you offered to help with the wedding, something just snapped. She didn't mean what she said at Christmas. She's been trying to find you ever since." I almost hung up, but something in Victoria's voice stopped me. "The thing is," Victoria continued, "we found her diary. From when we were kids. She wrote about you every day, Sarah. About how proud she was of you, how worried she was that you felt left out, how hard she tried to make sure you felt loved. She was always afraid that Marcus and I overshadowed you, that you felt like you didn't belong. She said she saw too much of herself in you and it scared her." My hands were shaking. "She was the youngest in her family too," Victoria went on. "Did you know that? She was the one who never quite fit in, who felt like she had to work twice as hard for half the attention. She said she'd sworn she'd never make her own kids feel that way, but somehow she did it anyway. She's been carrying that guilt for years." Victoria took a shaky breath. "What she said at Christmas, she told Dad later that night that it was like hearing her own mother's voice coming out of her mouth. Her mom used to say horrible things when she drank. Mom called you the next morning to apologize, but your phone was disconnected. Then she found out you'd moved and she just broke down." I was crying now, silent tears streaming down my face. "Please, Sarah. I know we don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't. But she's dying and she just wants to tell you she's sorry. She wants to tell you how much she loves you. Don't let her die thinking you hate her." The message ended and I sat in my kitchen sobbing. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd built my new life around, was crumbling. But was Victoria telling the truth? Or was this just another manipulation, another way to get me to come running back and fix everything? I looked out at the ocean, at the peaceful life I'd built, and felt the old familiar tug-of-war in my chest. Stay and protect the peace I'd found, or go back and risk having my heart broken all over again. But this time it wasn't about them. It was about me. About the woman I wanted to be. Could I really live with myself if my mother died thinking I hated her? The answer, I realized, was no. I was on a plane to Portland within 6 hours. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and despair. I found my family in the ICU waiting room. Dad slumped in a chair looking like he'd aged 10 years. Marcus pacing by the windows. Victoria curled up in Jennifer's arms with her eyes red and swollen. They all looked up when I walked in. "Sarah," Dad whispered, standing up so fast he nearly fell over. Marcus just stared at me like I was a ghost. Victoria ran to me and threw her arms around my neck, sobbing. "I can't believe you came. How is she?" I asked. Dr. Williams appeared at my elbow. "She's unconscious, but her vitals improved dramatically about an hour ago. Sometimes patients can sense when family arrives." She led me to Mom's room. The woman in the bed looked so small, so fragile. Nothing like the powerful, intimidating mother who dominated my childhood. I sat down next to her bed and took her hand. "Mom," I whispered. "I'm here." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then landing on my face. "Sarah." Her voice was barely audible. "I'm here, Mom. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean any of it. I squeezed her hand. I know. I was drunk and I was angry, but not at you. Never at you. I was angry at myself. I was angry at my own mother for making me feel the way I made you feel. Mom, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She struggled to sit up a little. I need you to know. I was so proud of you, Sarah. So proud. Your little accounting business. I bragged about it to everyone. Mrs. Henderson, the ladies at book club, everyone. I told them my daughter was an entrepreneur. I started crying. You never told me that. I should have. I should have told you every day. Instead, I let my own insecurities make me cruel to the one person who loved me unconditionally. She reached up with a trembling hand and touched my face. You were never the problem, sweetheart. You were the solution. You were the one who took care of everyone, who remembered birthdays, who made sure we all stayed connected. When you left, everything fell apart. What do you mean? Marcus and Jennifer almost got divorced. Victoria called off her engagement. Your father and I could barely speak to each other. The guilt was eating us alive. We destroyed our family because we were too proud to admit we were wrong. I looked back at the waiting room where my family was huddled together, all of them watching through the glass. They love you too, Mom said, following my gaze. Victoria's been planning to elope because she couldn't imagine getting married without you there. Marcus quit his job because he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said to you. We fell apart without you, Sarah. We didn't realize how much we needed you until you were gone. For the first time in my life, I felt like my mother was really seeing me. Not as the problem child, not as the disappointment, but as the person I'd always been trying to be. I love you, Mom, I whispered. I love you too, baby. So much. More than I ever knew how to show you. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Will you stay? Will you give us another chance? I looked at this woman who'd given me life, who'd hurt me deeper than anyone else ever could, who was fighting to stay alive just to apologize to me. I'll stay, I said. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt like I was home. Mom recovered slowly over the next month. I moved back to Portland, not to my old apartment, but to a new place closer to the family I was learning to love again. Victoria postponed her wedding so we could plan it together. Marcus and I started having coffee every Sunday morning, just the two of us, rebuilding the relationship we'd lost. And Dad started calling me every evening just to ask about my day. It wasn't perfect. We all had years of hurt to work through, patterns to break, apologies to make. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged in my own family. Sometimes the best gift isn't getting what you want. Sometimes it's learning that what you thought you wanted isn't what you needed at all. Christmas came again, and this time when Mom raised her glass for a toast, she looked directly at me and said, "The best gift is having our daughter home where she belongs." And this time I believed her.